Hi, welcome to Women on Stage conference. My name is Maria, and before we start talking about how you build a chatbot product in steps, I want to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my journey. I started working with AI and chatbots about 12 years ago. I did some AI research in Hebrew University and was programming self-driving cars in Mobileye. And about 7 years ago, I discovered chatbots. That was a life-changing moment for me when I realized that finally computers can communicate with us humans in our own language. I was lucky to lead the conversational AI program of one of the biggest pharma companies in the world. But my real passion, to be honest, always lied with social impact. I was an environmental activist as a university student. I've co-founded and led the Engineers Without Borders chapter for a few years, co-founded a nonprofit and worked with populations around the world. So about 4.5 years ago, after years of doing AI by day and social impact in my spare time, I finally took a leap of faith and founded Tangible AI, a consulting company that makes AI accessible and affordable to nonprofits around the world. So I've been speaking about chatbots for a few years now, and I always used to start these conversations with what conversational AI is and what chatbots are. But I feel I don't need to do this anymore because ever since ChatGPT came into our lives, I get much more my audience mostly understands what chatbots are all about. If you haven't tried and played with ChatGPT yet, please stop this recording and try it. But if you need a few more things to convince you that a chatbot may be a good solution for the problem that you're trying to solve for your users, here's another couple of facts. First, there are more than 4 billion users on messaging platforms every month. There are more people that have phones and have access to messaging than people that have running water. That's the biggest digital audience on the planet. In addition, if you look, younger populations like millennials or Gen Z are much more comfortable with texting rather than talking. And finally, in our increasingly speedy world, 90% of consumers expect immediate response to their queries. They don't want to wait. So hopefully I've convinced you why chatbots might be a viable solution. But let's talk a little bit about the chatbots around us. You've probably seen them in sales, customer support, HR, and other functions. But broadly, they can be divided into a few categories. The first and the oldest one, and probably also the most common one, are option-based chatbots. These are the chatbots you interact with by pushing buttons or when they offer you a few options and you choose one of them. There is no complicated natural language processing involved. The interaction is determined by a decision tree algorithm, and despite their simplicity, these chatbots are pretty much everywhere, and a lot of chatbots you see around you are actually option-based. The more sophisticated generation that people started to actively use about 10 years ago are intent-based chatbots. These are the chatbots that use some natural language understanding in order to discern the user's intent. So they realize that switch the lights off, Alexa, lights out, or darkness please are actually signify the same intent from the user to turn off the lights, and they're able to match the user's phrase to that intent and to the appropriate response that is pre-programmed into the chatbot. Finally, we're getting to the recent developments in the chatbots. One very common types of chatbot that is increasingly popular are knowledge chatbot. These are generative chatbots that sit on that are given a massive set of documents, thousands, maybe millions of documents. And every time you ask a question, they retrieve the relevant documents to your question and generate a response based on those documents. This technique is called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG. And finally, inspired by ChatGPT and similar, there are more and more fully generative chatbots, and also all combinations of the bots that we've seen above with generative capabilities. So now that we have a mutual understanding about what chatbots are good for and what types they are out there, let's chart our journey for today. But let's make a deal. I have gathered a lot of knowledge, tips, and resources over my 7 years journey with chatbots. But if I guide you through all of them, I'll bore you to death. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to guide you through the 10 steps that I'm presenting here. And then you can head to my profile on Women on Stage and get access to the slides of this lecture. And you'll see that after every step of the journey, you get a slide with tips, tools, and resources that they can use to broaden your knowledge and also to apply the steps that we are talking here. The last thing I would say is that you don't necessarily need all these 10 steps. If you're trying to create a simple sales funnel bot on your website, you probably won't need all these steps. But if you want to create something more meaningful, something that really makes an impact in your users' lives, such as the chatbots that we are building, you'd better consider the steps that we list here. To make them a bit less theoretical, I'm going to use as a case study one of the chatbots that we've been building over the last 3 years. Maya educates teens in Nepal about how to keep themselves safe from being victims of human trafficking. She has interacted with more than 30,000 teenagers over the last 3 years, and I think there is a lot to be learned from the stages that we took in order to build her. So without further ado, let's dive into our journey. And it can be separated into 3 main stages, with the first stage being ideation. So as with any digital product, your journey with chatbots always starts with understanding your problem better, and especially understanding your users. It's important to understand who you are designing for, what are their pain points, and what is the value that your chatbot can provide them with. With Maya, we had a tough problem ahead of us. More than 1 million people in Nepal are in danger of trafficking, and as much as 40,000 people were trafficked in a given year, women, men, and children. So there is a dire need to make sure that the younger generation understands how not to get themselves in tricky situation where they might be trafficked and exploited. But the problem is, safety education is inherently boring. This is not something a teen would do in their spare time. So our challenge was to think how we can make this boring topic, safety behaviors against trafficking, more interactive and fun. So let's move to stage 2. So now that you think you have a problem you want to solve with a chatbot, it's time to have a good think and understand, is the chatbot really needed here? Maybe there is a pressure from your company to implement these new technologies. We've all met those bosses that will ask you, why can't we just 3D print a chatbot into a Bitcoin, right? But as a chatbot consultant, I actually spend a lot of my time telling people that chatbot is not what you need. You might need an app, you might do away with digital campaign, and if you need to help people navigate your site, you might be better off just improving the UX so that you don't need an assistant to guide them to the right places. So ask yourself, is a chatbot a significantly better solution for your problem? And this is also an opportunity to think, what kind of chatbot do you need? Not all the chatbots need to be generative. In fact, even today, the majority of chatbots that we build are still heavily options heavy. And the reason is that you need to find the appropriate technology for the problem that you're solving. So Maya is an interesting example because it was far from the first solution to the trafficking education problem that the organization we worked with came up with. It's actually part of a bigger project called Protect that educated teens about human trafficking with training youth ambassadors, street performances, in-class sessions. But all of these were put to a halt when a pandemic started in 2020. This is why a digital solution such as Maya came in really vital time and was a really important part of this campaign to continue education as the schools closed down and the social quarantining rules set into place. Finally, one of the things that I really encourage you to do is very early in your planning, build a proof of concept. Build the very simple version of your chatbot. The reason why I suggest you to do that is you can discover a lot. You can discover that maybe the experience is not what you imagine it to be, and actually Chatbot is not such a great solution. On the other hand, you might actually understand how else your users can use your chatbot and what other value it can provide. And sometimes you might discover that the proof of concept you just built is all that you need and you don't need a lot of the other steps. So there are plenty of tools out there to build prototypes and chatbots. They're all listed here and you're welcome to try them in order to create your prototype. So this is an opportunity again to do a thinking and understand if you're moving forward. But if you're moving forward, you're now in the building stage. The first step of building your chatbot, especially if it's a chatbot that includes multiple domains, is getting yourself a team. There is an African proverb that says, if you want to go far, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And the reason is, there are multiple people out there whose expertise can make your chatbot better. There are multiple people that can help you, that can partner with you in order to reach bigger audiences. So think who can your chatbot benefit from their contribution. So this is just a quick list of all the people that we collaborated with when we created Maya. And aside from IT teams, you can see that it includes people like child safeguarding specialist or specialist for gender lens to assure that the content is gender appropriate. So team is just a small part of planning that you need to put in your chatbot. There are a lot of questions that you should ask. What is the channel that you're going to use? Is it social media, messaging platforms, web, or Slack? What's the timeline? How do you going to promote your bot and how do you measure success? I won't bore you with all the details of Maya's planning, but you can find this useful tool that we created, a chatbot design canvas, in the lecture slide and use it for your own projects. That's the fun part of creating a chatbot, is diving into design. It's a fun part, but also a hard one. One of the things that we discovered after leading dozens of chatbot projects is that about 80 to 90% of your audience would live within up to 5 interactions with the bot. So you have a very short time window and very few interactions in order to capture your users' interest. So you need to use those in order to get them to value as soon as possible. So this is your happy path. How do you get your users to the magic moment? But one of the things that you need to consider is also how things can go wrong. What things do you need to, what scenarios you need to be prepared for? The designing goes hand in hand with building. And you might have seen this graphic before, right? How to design your minimum viable product or how to apply the lean startup principles in design. And the important message that this graphic carries is that a minimum viable product, an MVP of a car, is not half a car. It's something that serves the purpose of a car but solves it in a more minimal way. So you need to look for your skateboard. you need to look for the minimum viable solution that will start getting you, that will solve at least some of the user's problems. And you can gradually enhance it until you build your full car. So next step for you is really to design this roadmap of moving from a bigger and more advanced product until you get to your car. So to give Maya as an example again, the very first prototype that we built, by the way, in a few days, just included a couple of explanations about trafficking and safety behaviors. And that product already got some positive feedback from the users. We then added more content, more languages, quizzes, interactive stories, videos, and ultimately some natural language understanding capabilities. But all of this took about a year when the first version of Maya was up in the air after a week and a half. So you've built your bot, you've iterated, now we're at the last stage, launching and scaling your chatbot. The first very important step that you need to do before your launch is testing. And I can't stress that enough. Your users will find lots of ways to break your bot. I can tell you for sure. So this is one of the reasons why we undergo at least 4 stages of testing, where we start talking to the bot as a team and then test it with users that are close to us but are low stakes. We test it with target users, and then ultimately the soft launch is the stage where the product is already live but still is not promoted. For generative AI, there is another very important technique that's called red teaming. That's basically a stage where multiple people are actively trying to break your generative chatbot, are trying to make it say things that it shouldn't supposed to say, or do what it's not supposed to do. Testing is really, really vital. So just a simple example of something that we just didn't realize when we built our bot is that we were building it for Nepal, obviously, but it took us all the way to testing to recognize that actually, for some reason, we put English first instead of putting the native language as it's appropriate first. So this is just an example of things that you might not see, but your users will tell you if you go through proper testing process. Once you launch your chatbot, the few first months of it being alive will go heavily on monitoring and optimizing your bot. Some of the questions you might ask yourself is the chatbot reaching its goals? Or maybe, what do I want to improve about the experience? But ultimately, a lot of the monitoring and optimizing work is focusing on churn. Churn is a huge problem for most chatbots. And one of the things that we always track in all of our chatbot projects is where do your users disengage and how we can improve that funnel in order for less users to leave before they reached value. One small lesson that we discovered after working with Maya for a few years is that less is more. So at the beginning, we measured dozens of different metrics and put them all in dashboard. And then we realized that the amount of different things we measure actually obscures us the important things that we need to pay attention to. So one of the lessons that we learned is really less is more, and sometimes all you need on your dashboard is a few simple charts. We've reached the last 10th step, and I can't emphasize this enough. Don't leave your chatbot alone. With some apps and websites, you can put them on a back burner, you can leave them up for a few years and nothing will happen. A chatbot is a living, breathing thing. You have a wealth of information that comes from it in the form of user inputs. Use it in order to update your bot and think what else and what content you could add and update. And finally, give your bot some time. Remember that as any digital solution, the more people interact with, the more it returns on the investment of time and effort that you put into it. So this is why early on in the planning stage, we talked about how to scale your bot, how to get big audiences to it. Give it time to succeed. So, this is our journey for today, and I remind you again that if these steps sound a little bit theoretical, you have tips and tools for all of these steps in the lecture slides. The one takeaway that I want you to take off of this lecture is that building a chatbot is easy. There are drag and drop tools out there that will let you build a chatbot in half an hour. But building a good chatbot with good design that really brings impact and value into your user's life requires skill, time, and commitment. These are some of the do's that we saw in the lecture: talking to your users, doing a lot of testing, and iterating as you build. We also saw some don'ts. Don't skip due diligence, don't underestimate the resources that you need in order to build a good solution, and don't neglect it once you launched it. Thank you so much. If you have more questions about chatbots, please reach out. I'm always happy to talk about this. And enjoy the rest of the conference.